Joining me, Peter Tchir, head of macro strategy at Academy Securities. Peter, welcome back to the show. I think first time we've talked in 2025, so Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you as well.
We've got bonds moving. We got inflation tomorrow. We've got, obviously, an inauguration around the corner. So what's top of the list in your analysis right now?
You know, I think we've been pretty steadfast that bond yields are going higher. So that's been kind of our call coming into year end, the start of the year. You know, we've pulled up some charts. It just looks bidless, right? No matter what happens, bond yields seem to kind of trickle higher. For example, today, right, we had pretty decent PPI data. We rallied briefly, and then we started selling off. So I think we're kind of doomed for 5% on 10s, and I think that's going to continue to weigh on markets. Maybe once we get to 5, you start seeing some buying, and a little bit once the inauguration starts happening, you start seeing with the executive orders, we get a little bit of a rebound. But I think until then, it's shaky, and you want to be very cautious and maybe underweight or trying to trade this from the short side.
What's the ranking of those potential executive orders? To me, that seems like the next real, well, other than inflation as a data point, but the next real potential market catalyst, given how much excitement's riding on political speculation for policy. What does that list look like? What needs to happen?
So I think tariffs are going to be the simpler part, right? Everyone's now talking about potentially smaller tariffs, gradual. That's one of the things he can do via executive order. So I think the market's reasonably prepared for that. I think it's about right, but it is actually inflationary, right? Every time companies and people see this potential for tariffs, it feels like they're going out and buying goods and services, pulling forward demand. And actually, that's been slightly inflationary. That's why I think CPI might be bad this month and going forward for the next couple months. I think we're kind of seeing this return of inflation. What I'll be watching really critical is on immigration. At Academy Securities, we've kind of had the view that Trump will go for some quote unquote easy wins. He will pick, criminals. He will pick some of these hotels that were supposed to be temporary places that have kind of become, entities of their own, where there's kind of their own economy around that, and shut some of those down. I think in New York City, you've seen Mayor Adams change his tune very much. So that's what we're watching for if he goes for the high wins. If we see something that looks like a very draconian immigration idea, then I think we kind of freak out. That's when markets start getting nervous. So I think right now we can be comfortable. We go for big wins, and we don't see mass, deportation, this real digging out migrants and kicking them out of the country. That's my hope. I think that's the direction we head. If it's worse than what I think, that's going to weigh on markets heavily.
Okay. Do you see any of the policies under discussion currently as being necessarily disinflationary or deflationary in any way? Perhaps, I guess if you start removing huge swaths of the workforce, that might be an example of one.
Yeah, right now I really don't see anything particularly deflationary. I think you're going to see work from home disappear. Goes from work from office, even with the government employees. Right? I think we talked about it last time. 100% of federal government employees are still work from home. Getting them back in the office, I think all those things are slightly inflationary. Having said that, I think some of it's a quote unquote good inflation, right? This is people getting back to work, it's jobs, it's paying, it hopefully gets the economy going well. So that I'm not too worried about. I am watching Bitcoin, and to me, Bitcoin is one of the tells where Trump seems to have made a commitment to the Bitcoin community. And so much of what we're trying to weigh in markets is Trump going to be successful in his policy implementations? We don't know yet. And I've been kind of, unfortunately, being stuck watching Bitcoin as a relatively useful tell on where the market's headed on Trump and what he'll do in his first few weeks or months in office.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. It sort of has become a proxy for policy in some ways. So do you think the chop, some of the negativity in cryptos alongside stocks in the last few weeks indicate perhaps a rethinking of maybe the political impact? Because markets have already closed the policy gap up from the election. Bitcoin still, it's got a big chunk that it's still above from November 6th, which is like 80,000.
Yeah, and this one I'm really kind of torn on. One, I think myself and probably many pundits have underestimated the power of the cryptocurrency lobby, right? It's a very powerful lobby. They have a lot of money. The people who are the richest tend to be fairly independent, fairly wealthy, very good at getting what they want. So they pushed hard. They definitely backed the Trump campaign. So you have that political pressure. And the other side of it, I just don't see why the US of all countries would decide to make Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency reserve. To me, borrowing money to buy crypto at the government level makes absolutely no sense. It may or may not make sense at a corporate or personal level, but the U.S. government should not be participating in that. So that's why I guess what I'm trying to balance is he going to live through those commitments and create something like that? in which case I could see Bitcoin going to 125, 150 pretty easily. Or does he fade on that, pull back, and then I think we go back to 55, 60,000 on Bitcoin?
If they don't announce strategic reserve buying?
Yeah, I think that really is what is driving this current wave, right? To a lot of people, one, there'd be huge new demand, but then also it really takes it to mainstream, right? Well, if the US government in some shape or form is going to buy cryptocurrency, maybe I should too. I think if they deny that, it will weigh heavily on it, because not only it'll be even different, right, than not having bought it before, because now there will have been this big push. So someone in the government will clearly have decided, no, we don't think this is a good idea. We don't want to have this. You know, Jamie Dimon's still very negative on it. I'm probably more on his. There is no real use case. So why would the US government buy that? So I think there's a chance this gets shot down. I think that drags down cryptocurrencies, and it drags down probably the rest of the market with it.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so that point, well made and clear. You mentioned bonds that you think we're going to push towards 5. What about the notion of earnings being able to kind of drive rotation within the market? Peter, we've got banks set to report. You mentioned Jamie, last name Dimon. What do you think about trying to play the banks as maybe a like in between here that's like not as speculative, perhaps policy dependent, but also benefits if you know, markets open up and spigots flow in public markets, et cetera?
Yeah, I do think we are seeing, even today, right, the Russell 2000s outperforming a little bit. So I think you are going to see stable and value outperform this year. I think it's probably going to be a slightly down market, at least at the start of the year, but I do think you're going to see pretty strong outperformance by stable and value type names. So I would include the financials in that. I think the energy sector is going to do very well, regardless of energy prices. I think we are going to see an effort to not just drill, baby, drill, but we're calling it refine, baby, refine. And we think that applies to all commodities, right? It's not just extracting them from the ground anymore. It's actually being able to process them. When you look at rare earths and critical minerals, China still does about 90% of the processing of rare earths and critical minerals. If we want to be safe from a country that we have this ongoing friction with, we need to do more of that at home. And I think that's something we're going to see from this administration. And so I like those sectors that will benefit. So anything kind of in the commodity space, but also the commodity, you know, the ones that help commodities producers, you know, get the things out of the ground should do well. So a lot of big equipment manufacturers should do pretty well in this.
Okay. All right. Equipment manufacturers, that's a nice kind of potential for a sector, maybe overlooked, that has potential. What about the rest of the world? When I hear about kind of some of the more cyclical things, like you mentioned, that makes me wonder, all right, how about some of that value potentially in international stocks?
So before we go to international, which is a little bit of a, you know, I do like commercial real estate. I think it should be a small part of your portfolio. I think we're kind of done with this work from home mentality, work from office. I think everyone's going to be 4 days is going to become the average this year, maybe 4.5 days a week. So every second week you get a Monday or Friday off. So I think there's that big push. I think you're seeing kind of a law and order theme play throughout many of these cities. Look at what's going on in New York City, where they are kind of starting to enforce some of these rules around shoplifting. So I think commercial real estate is going to be a sneaky little good play. So I want to own that. Across the rest of the world, I'm just not really comfortable with anything. I think I own some China because I think China is probably going to figure out some way to deal with Trump. I think they are going to make progress in terms of selling their goods to a lot of emerging markets countries. You'd like to own Europe, just how underperformed, you know, it's been, but I just can't. There's so much political, you know, going on where everyone seems to be moving a little bit more towards separation, even within Europe. And for the first time, the German economy is struggling, right? Every time we've had any kind of issues in Germany or in Europe, you could look at Germany. So right now, I am pretty domestic focused, unfortunately.
Okay. So U.S. All the way. All right. But
so I am bearish on the U.S. So I'm not sure.
But,
we got a little bit of trouble here on.
Well, it seems like the areas that you do like, though, are still going to be U.S. Based. But at an index level, it seems like you're ready to fade it.
Yeah, so I think you're fading QQQ and you're trying to own, you know, IWM or something like that, and small bits of commercial real estate, so maybe the value or the small caps. That's where you kind of want to have your money, and you're kind of overweight that and heavily underweight the, you know, the previous gains. Even you look at these charts and like, oh, wow, this stock looks cheap. It's down 10, 20% in the last month. Oh, man, it's still up 80, 90%. So I think there's more froth to come out of this market, unfortunately.
All right. Peter Tchir, thank you very much.